welcome back to my channel. It's Bells. We are back from Christmas vacation and I am so excited. I actually asked you guys on my Instagram what you want to see as my first video back from vacation, and you guys picked the books that I desperately want to read in 2022. This is my giant 2022 TBR. I'm gonna tell you right now, none of these are like new releases. A lot of them are books that I've been waiting to read for a long time. Let's bring on the books. I'm so excited. So I've got 17 books on this list that I definitely really want to get to. I kind of broke them up into little sections. We'll see how this goes. My first section is like fiction-ish. The first book that I really would love to get to this year is A Little Life by Hanya Nagahara. This book has been all over YouTube. Everybody loves this book, but everybody on the planet says that it's like the most triggering book that you could read. We're basically just following the life of these different classmates from college through middle age and their respective traumas. It's supposed to be one of the most like lovely most wonderfully written books. And so I have been scared to read it for a long time, but I think I might be in a place where I am ready to read this book. And I think that it's a book that you have to be ready for. You know what I mean? The next book I want to get to is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. So this is like a dark thriller horror that's kind of like Stepford Wivey about like this perfect family in this perfect neighborhood and everything is perfect. Until suddenly it's not, and it's actually super culty and creepy and weird. I love books about cults. I love books about things not being what they seem. I love the whole Stepford wife premise. I think that's such a fun story and such a fun thing to like redo in a new way. The next book that I want to read is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. It's a fantasy with two leading ladies, which is always important for me in my fantasies. I like to read about women. We've got two lead female characters. One of them is a lady in waiting. Oh, hello, little cat. One of them is a dragon rider, which sounds cool. I know it's an LGBTQ plus story. I'm just excited to read it. It looks so cool. There's dragons. The cover is really pretty. I feel like a lot of fantasies really cover these really wide, giant war type concepts. The world is always changing in a lot of fantasies that I read, or a lot of traditional fantasies, and I like that this is structured in that concept, but clearly with a lot of like new ideas. Ooh, the next one. I don't know why I haven't read this yet, but I wanted to read White Ivy by Susie Yang for like forever. Basically, it's about this young immigrant woman, Ivy, who is a thief, and that's how she supports her family. And she winds up being sent to China after being discovered she had a dalliance with a boy who she was not allowed to have a dalliance with. And she's kind of re-finds her love like years later as this very ruthless young woman just trying to survive in the world. And he's like a little rich boy, and so she gets in with his family. I think it's going to be a really interesting book about class and race. I love reading books about immigration from an immigrant's perspective, because we shouldn't be reading these stories by white authors. We should be reading them from the people who have lived these stories. It's like at the top of my list, and yet I still like haven't read it. So 2022 is the year I'm gonna do it. The next book I really want to get to is Cuckooland by Anthony Dorr. From what I remember about what it's about, it's basically like a fantasy story about libraries. And if you guys know anything about me, it's that I love the library. Yeah, it spans like 6 centuries. These 5 characters are all bound together by their mutual love for a single book. And give me a fantasy story about why stories are important? Mwah. So the next book that I want to read that's kind of in this category is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zoner. The memoir is about her visiting an H Mart after her mother's death of cancer. And so it's a story about cancer. It's a story about how that affects the people who are going through it and the people around that person, and how society views cancer at large. I know it was just supposed to be an incredible story, so I'm quite excited to read it. I have been putting this one off too. I don't know if you guys can see a theme, but I put off books that I know will make me uncomfortable and or sad, which is never good because they're always the books that I like the most. And then the last book that I want to read that's like in this fiction category. Oh no. Detransition Baby by Tory Peters. I literally bought it because I was like, I'm gonna read it if I buy it. was, what, 6 months ago? Yeah. Basically, it's about this couple who are both trans, and then one of them decides to detransition. Their romance is over, but there's like this weird third party. They all want to have a baby. The couple that broke up wants to like rekindle their romance. I mean, it's obviously a social commentary piece. I think I'm hesitant to read this one, or I've been hesitant to read it because I don't want it to be bad. It could be like absolutely amazing, or it could be really bad. I don't think there's an in-between for this story, so I'm very curious to see where it goes, but like I'm also scared. So we're gonna move from that category into like the series that I want to continue or start. The next book that I definitely want to read is The Bride Test by Helen Huang, which is the second in her Kiss Quotient trilogy series. It follows Kai from the first book, and I just loved the first book so much. This is absolutely the best romance I've ever read in my entire life, and I just want to see what else this woman has to offer us in the land of books and reading. So I've been super excited to read that. And then the Wheel of Time Amazon series just came out, and everyone's mad about it. No one thinks it's any good. But what I did learn is that Robert Jordan, who wrote the Wheel of Time like fantasy series, is kind of like along the same lines. Like if you like Brandon Sanderson, you'll also like Robert Jordan, especially because they did the last 3 novels of this series together. So there's like 14 hefty boys. I bought the first one and it's getting shipped to me right now. I am so excited to read it. Give me more fantasy. I don't know what it's about, but it probably involves a war, since I already talked about how fantasies are often about the entire world changing. Then I mentioned earlier that I am trying to read Stephen King's books because I really, really like his writing. I've got 2 more that are like the first ones I definitely want to get to this year. The first one I want to read that's already on hold for me in the library is Misery. This is about a novelist who gets rescued by his like biggest fan, and then she like takes him to like this creepy cabin in the woods to like heal him or whatever. And when she discovers that he's going to kill off her favorite characters in the books, she gets like really controlling and tries to get him to rewrite his story in a different way. And I know that Kathy Bates is in the movie, and honestly I really want to watch the movie, but I feel like I need to read the book first for this one. I love stories about writing. It kind of gives me similar vibes to like The Secret Window, that Johnny Depp movie where he's like a novelist who's slowly going crazy in the woods, which was objectively probably based off of Misery. The next one my dad actually recommended as my next Stephen King book to read, and that would be The Stand. That one is like a post-apocalyptic fantasy about a plague, the struggle between good and evil. You got a couple fun characters. There's like a creepy cult leader, and it's Stephen King, so it's gonna be dark as hell. I'm very excited, if you couldn't tell by my like face hurting smile. Yeah, so those are the 2 Stephen King books that I like for sure am going to read this year. So we'll move on. I've got 2 more categories left. We've got classics that I want to get to, and then the 2 nonfiction books that I really want to get to. So we'll start with the classics. The first one that I've been like really excited to read for a while is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. I've never read a Dostoyevsky. I know it's very philosophical. It's about God. It's a murder mystery and a courtroom drama and an erotic, it literally says on the Goodreads thing, erotic rivalry in a series of triangular love affairs. So that sounds like a lot of fun to me. I really am curious what erotic means in the concept of, when was this fucking written? 1879. Oh, I didn't know it was the final novel by Dostoyevsky, and it's considered to be his masterpiece. Okay, I didn't know that. I just thought it sounded cool. I have a lot of classics that I want to get to, actually, because I've discovered I don't actually hate classics. I just hate misogynistic classics, which I think is valid. I go back to The Mysteries of Adolfo because that was a really hefty classic that I really ended up enjoying because it's feminist fiction that was like literally hidden in the guise of a gothic horror to get people to read it. The next one I really, really, really want to get to is The Picture of Dorian Gray, obviously by Oscar Wilde. Really, what I know about this is that Dorian Gray is obviously gay in the book, and that's why it's been banned in a bunch of places. And straight up, like, if Oscar Wilde had the balls to write about a gay character, then it deserves to be read. And so I want to read it. I want to see what the fuss is all about. I also had a friend recommend it to me and said that it was just phenomenal. Oh, it's literally about like a portrait. That makes sense. Guys, I'm so sorry. I did not do any prep for this video. Okay, I didn't know the picture of Dorian Gray is literally about someone who has a portrait painted of himself, and then as Dorian Gray does like worse things, his portrait becomes more aged. That's wild. So besides the social part, this sounds like a party. The next one that I want to reread, the last time I read this book was like grade 8. I'm very excited to read this again, especially because Anne Rice just died, which that gives away what the book is. I really want to read Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice again. I was never really encouraged to read horror books or books about magic or vampires or scary things. So I remember this was one of the first books I read that was like that, and it really struck me. I remember just thinking it was incredible. So I am very excited to like return to it as an adult and see if I still feel the same way. My last classic that I again want to reread is I'd like to read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott again. I didn't actually see the movie that just came out because I wanted to reread the book before I watched the movie again, and then I just never did. I just remember it being such a significant book in my life and in a lot of people's lives. I think I will get a lot more out of it now than I did when I read it before. I also want to get to The Master and Margarita by... The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, which is about a cat and the devil. That's it. That's why I want to get to it. Doesn't that sound like fun? And then finally, the nonfictions that are really important to me that I would really love to read this year, ideally soon. All of these books I want to read ideally soon, but I can't read 17 books all at once. The first nonfiction book that I really want to get to is What's Your Pronoun? Beyond He and She by Dennis Barron. This is basically about like how pronouns have become to be so politicized as they are, the role that they've come to play in linguistics, like in language, and a lot of history and work has been put into this book. My last book on this list, 17 books is a lot to talk about, is actually a book about Toronto. I want to learn more about Toronto since I live here now. I want to start with Missing from the Village, the story of serial killer Bruce MacArthur, the search for justice, and the system that failed Toronto's queer community by Justin Ling. So obviously this is about a serial killer who was killing people in the Toronto queer community and how the police dealt with it, the failure of the social and political systems that were around it, how they let it become an unsolved case for so long. I think that this is really important to read since I live here. On that lovely note, those are my 17 books that I absolutely want to get to in 2022. We'll see how it goes. I would love to hear about what books you guys really want to get to in 2022. If you have like new releases that you're really excited about, or older books that maybe you want to reread, I'd love to hear about it. My ever-growing TBR also loves to hear about it. Thank you so much for sticking around this long. It has been such a pleasure talking about books, watching you guys get excited about books, and sharing your favorites with me is so awesome, and I love it so much, and I'm so glad to be back making content. It's crazy how much I like legitimately missed it. If you're looking for a similar TBR, my tarot TBR from December for January is really fun, so if you haven't seen it yet, I'll put a little link right here. Go and check it out, and otherwise I will see you all in my next video very soon.